So if he doesn't do that, he won't get Molly Coco.
You will not serve him Molly Coco.
Let me use this
Oh, man.
opportunity also to
Anyway.
celebrate His Excellency John Dramani Mahama and his lovely wife, Madam Lodina Mahama, who this week have celebrated 30 years of a love that is infectious, a love that is worth emulating. In this day and age where it is more common to see couples divorced than staying together. And for people at that level, myself and George haven't gotten to that level. We've been at a lower level, and we can tell you the kind of stress and strain public office has put on our unions. For them to have stuck together this long, it's worth celebrating. And what better way to celebrate it than how they did the 45-bed facility in Bole, for the people of Bole and its environs. And even this morning, as we continue to celebrate them over the weekend, for me, I tap into that blessing so that me too, one day,
you can
I will also
celebrate
do
30 years.
30 years. This year, I'm 10.
10.
Yeah, and
You've
so
gone far.
we are following their footsteps. The other day, me and a brother of mine were discussing. There are about 8 of us who are all in the political space across the political divide,
I see.
who got married within weeks of each other. It's just 2 of us who are still together with our spouses.
Wow.
That's how.
Out of the 10.
That's how high the attrition rate is. Anyway, but we give God all the glory.
Absolutely.
Now, coming to issues of SIM card. Let me start by saying that any act or any policy or any directive that seeks to sanitize our digital space and that seeks to provide government and law enforcement with a credible database of persons who hold SIM cards is wholly supported by the NDC and the Minority Caucus. And I'm duly aligned. In fact, the regime for the registration of SIM cards in this country was a policy direction of the NDC.
As indicated in the timelines that I put out there.
Absolutely. In 2010, under Professor Mills, with Haruna Idrisu as communications minister, we went to Parliament with LI 2006, and it was signed into law. It became law in 2011, and that's the Subscriber Identity Model Registration Regulations 2011. As we speak today, there is only one law in Ghana, one law, that governs the registration of SIM cards. Now, before I go into that law, there's a principle of legislation. Legislative instruments in themselves are of 2 kinds. You've got specific legislation, and then you've got omnibus legislation. Now, the omnibus legislations are called Christmas tree legislation or portmanteau legislation because they cover a wide gamut of issues. Then you have specific legislation that is made for specific issues. So take, for example, the constitutional instruments that are laid by the Electoral Commission. Specific legislation for specific issues. You can't use CI 92, for example, for any other thing outside of elections.
Right.
The same Identity Model Registration Regulations 2011, LI 2006, is a specific legislation. It is specific to SIM card registration. So you cannot use LI 2006, even though it is under the ambit of the NCA. You cannot use it for spectrum management, which is also a function of the NCA. So it's specific for SIM registration. I'm stressing on this point so we are clear on that. Now, if this is the only law, the Minister of Communications today has not brought any amendment to this law. So this is still the law.
The 2006 law.
The 2011.
2011.
But it is LI 2006. Now, if you go to section 2 of LI 2006, it is titled, that's clause is registration of subscriber identity model. And subscriber identity model, I can't keep saying it repeated. That is SIM, SIM.
SIM.
That's what we call the SIM. Good. Now, this is what the law says. A network operator or service provider shall register a SIM for of a subscriber. 2.2. A subscriber, that is yourself and myself and George, shall, mandatory, shall for the purpose of the registration of the SIM of that subscriber, furnish the network operator, that's the telecom company or service provider, with the following information. A, the name and residential or occupational address of the subscriber. So my name, my address. B, the date of birth in the case of an individual, in the case of a body corporate incorporation or registration in the case of a partnership or unincorporated body of persons. And C, an identification document.
It doesn't specify the identification document for this purpose.
We'll get there. So basically the law in 2.2 says there are three things I need to provide: my name and address, my date of birth, and an identification document. Now, when I go to section 10 of LI 2006, it interprets for me and you and Eslausu and the whole government what the words used in the bill are, or the legislative instrument are. In this regulation, section 10, unless the context otherwise requires, identification document for a citizen includes I, a valid driver's license, II, a valid national health insurance identification card, III, a valid passport, IV, a valid voter's identification card, V, which is 5, a valid national identity card, which we call Ghana card. That's what we call, that's the national identity card, or VI, any other valid form of identification document the authority may determine, that's the NCA, may determine by publication in the Gazette and a daily newspaper. So these are what identification documents are. Now, of these 5, which have been stated, and then a 6th option for the minister or the authority to designate another, we don't know which it is. We have 5. I am aligned to the school of thought that says you can't use all 5. You can only use 4. The National Health Insurance Card, by virtue of the functioning of the ruling in the Abu Ramadan versus Electoral Commission case, you can no longer use the National Health Insurance Card. But your valid driver's license, valid passport, valid voter's ID card, and your national ID card, which is the Ghana card, are legal to be used. So why we have government restricting the registration to only the Ghana card beats my imagination.
So you've established a number of things. So there's an LI 2006.
Yes.
And that LI specifies this SIM registration process. In that LI, it gives details of the requirements for anybody to go through the SIM registration, which you applied in 2010.
Yes.
Now, there's another law which you have just quoted that details the form of identification that anybody should provide in the process of registering.
Yes.
And there are a number of identification sources and not just the Ghana card.
Yes.
And you're saying that this law still stands, has not been amended, but we have a restriction to the Ghana card.
Yes.
How did that happen?
Because the agents of this government, it's not just the Minister for Communications. We've seen the Bank of Ghana do same with bank accounts, are interpreting another specific legislation to be an omnibus law. And that is the LI 2111. So we finished LI 2006, passed by the NDC, by Haruna Idrisu as Minister for Communications. The following year, the same Haruna Idrisu, under the same Professor Mills, goes to Parliament and passes another specific legislation, the National Identity Register Regulations,
which gives some more details,
of 2012, for a different thing entirely. The first one was titled SIM Registrations Regulations. So that was to help the NCA. It talks about an authority in that LI. The authority there is the NCA, the National Communications Authority. So it was an LI specific to the NCA. That's why I started and told you, even under the NCA, there are a number of LIs. This LI cannot even be used for another function of the NCA, which is spectrum management.
That's right.
Now, this National Identity Register Regulations is for a completely different agency, which at the time used to be under the Minister for Communications, the National Identification Authority, NIA. Now, the NIA has a mandate in its parent law to compile a national identity register. That has nothing to do with SIM cards.
Registration.
Now, by virtue of the thinking of government at the time, the NDC government at the time, we intended to make the national card a final one-stop card, integrated with a number of other biometric cards that existed, create a national database. Now, because you were introducing the Ghana card after you had had several other legislations and things done, you wanted to ensure that there would be a gradual move to the Ghana card being one of the, or a one-stop shop. And I think that's a policy idea this government shares. And so you decide that since there are already other laws in operation that mandate specific cards or identification documents to be used, and you are now coming to pass a law or a legislation for the Ghana card, you should make it mandatory that for all Ghana's government services, irrespective of any other card, that prior to the coming into force of a Ghana card were used for identification, the Ghana card should also be accepted. So in section 7 of LI 2111, you have what we call the mandatory use of the national identity card. Now let me read. And it's very important we pay attention to the words. 7.1, a national identity card, which is a Ghana card, issued to an individual shall be used for the following transactions where identification is required. Now, I'll read it again. A national identity card issued to an individual shall be used. Shall. Mandatory. It means that card must be used. So if I go for the acquisition of a government service, which is the passport, before the coming into force of this LI, I needed to present an old passport or a birth certificate. Now, because of the function of this law, it then means that if I am unable to present a passport or a birth certificate, I can present a Ghana card. And you must accept it. Even though when you take the legislation that governs the issuance of passports, in that legislation, a Ghana card is not part of it. So you realize that if you did not make a mandatory use of the Ghana card in this legislation, presenting the Ghana card for services that predate the existence of the Ghana card, people would have questioned the basis for it.
That's right.
So you needed to make it mandatory that for all other services, take for example, if I wanted to get a driver's license, prior to the Ghana card, I would have had to go with a voter's ID card or a passport to get a driver's license. Now we've added a driver's license. So if I don't have any of those, or if I have any of those and I choose to come with my Ghana card, accept the Ghana card. So there is a list of about 14 things that you can do with
That's
it.
why the expression shall.
Okay. So it means that anybody offering a service
is mandated
to, in addition to whatever other cards, the laws that authorize you to provide that service, you should also accept anybody who shows up with a Ghana card, because the Ghana card is a creation of law from 2012. But we've been running this country since 1957, and there's been legislation for provision of services. And in all of those legislations, in most of those legislations, there was no provision for a national identity card as a valid document to be used. Do not forget that even with the banks, at a point in time after the Ghana card was issued, they couldn't accept the Ghana card because they couldn't verify it.
True.
You understand me? So you needed to create the legal framework for that to happen. Now, how the ministry and the Bank of Ghana have taken this provision in this specific legislation to become a Christmas tree legislation, an omnibus legislation, that would then supersede the legislation that is specific to SIM registration beats my mind. And now let me show you one important thing. In this legislation, in section 23 of this LI that they quote, I'll read something to you. Section 23 is a revocation clause. Normally in Parliament, when we are passing legislation, if you feel that the new legislation you are passing supersedes an existing legislation or will contradict with it or create a difficulty in its operation, you revoke either the entirety of that old law or portions that are in conflict. And so there's a revocation clause here that revokes some existing legislation. Let me read. Legislative instruments made under the Identity Cards Act 1972, NRCD 19129, and in force immediately before the commencement of these regulations are hereby revoked. So it means that we had an Identity Card Act of 1972. This LI 2111 revokes that. This LI 2111 did not revoke LI 2006, which is the legislation for registration of SIM cards. And so if that law has not been revoked, and that law is still functional, and that law is the only law for registration of SIM cards, and that law even takes into cognizance the Ghana card and accepts it, how then do you say you will not allow the valid driver's license, the valid passport, the valid voter's registration card, or a valid Ghana card as registration documents? And you see, let's put all the legalists I've spoken about aside. Common sense. If you answer, common sense. Today, I don't have a Ghana card.
You don't have a Ghana card?
No, I don't. I've not been able to get one because, again, you see the queues there. If I'm to go for the queues there, George Anders people will most likely bring me before Privileges Committee that I've missed 15 days because I will not get my card in 15 days with the queues that are there. And then I just afford them to happen to me.
Since he has mentioned my
so, let me I'm landing.
So
take it right into your digital part.
Why he hasn't got a Ghana card is that when the Ghana cards were being issued, he and his NDC told Ghanaians that they shouldn't go for the cards.
Right now, he's become Holy Spirit. He's been able to reveal to you.
So that's to say that you haven't gone through the SIM registration.
Now that we have come on recess, I intend to take 1 month to go and queue.
But I said tomorrow is the deadline.
Oh, forget it. That one, Kasayam from the minister is just talking.
The minister is just talking.
Don't please
value her.
Listen, the minister does not have the power. Listen, let me tell you something. Article 296 of our constitution is very clear. Yes, the minister has administrative power, authority. But Article 296 of the Constitution says you cannot exercise administrative authority in an arbitrary or capricious manner. Hey, what the minister is trying to do is not just arbitrary and capricious. It is malicious, it is ill-intended, it is whimsical, it is illogical. How do you tell me that I have a SIM card that is registered by law? You want to do a new re-registration. You are bypassing the legal requirements, setting your own marking scheme, your own requirements. Your requirements demand that I go to another state institution, the NIA. It is only the NIA that can issue me a Ghana card. The NIA is unable to issue me a Ghana card. Forget about me who has not been able to register. There are constituents of mine who have registered since 2018 who have not been able to get their cards. There are people who have misplaced their cards and for the past 6 months have been chasing the NIA for replacements. So all of those people are not able to register their SIM card, not because, like some they don't have a SIM card, a Ghana card. They have, or there's a problem with their SIM card. Some even have the SIM cards, but when they try to link it to their SIM, the Ghana card, when they try to link it to their SIM cards, they are told it is invalid. All of those people, by function of the inability of a state agency to provide them a public service, you say you are going to punish them for the inefficiencies of the state agency, not their own making. Is that not arbitrary? Is that not capricious? Is that not an abuse of their human rights? And then the telcos, I beg you, let me land. The telcos, don't worry, George, we'll give you plenty of time. The telcos who, we go to IMF.
Yes.
When John Mahama and NDC went to IMF, they gave us like $1 billion over 3 years. $1 billion per. This one that we are going now, get $2 billion. Okay? $2 billion. That's what we are going to the IMF for.
A number of
George's
different figures.
George's former entity alone that he used to work for, MTN, over the past 7 years has invested in excess of $1.5 billion US in capex infrastructure in Ghana. If you put all the telcos together, it's in excess of the 2 billion that we are going to IMF for. This is what the telcos do. Government is complaining of funds and revenue. The telecom companies are the second largest taxpayers in Ghana. How do they pay the second largest tax? The calls that me and you make, CST, corporate tax, that they pay. They are only able to pay that quantum of taxes to government because we make phone calls. George calls his wife, honey, I love you, I'm coming home. I call my wife, Davi, I'm hungry. Me vanoi, and all of that. Those calls that we make and the data we use is what the telcos use to pay government. So if you then come and take almost 8 million of us off their network, how much are they going to pay you?
Mr. Sam George, finally on this one, you are on the quick loan bit, and I dovetailed into the e-levy because it's all connected directly to this conversation that we are having and how that is going to impact on government revenue stream going forward. This is what we've seen with the revision of the e-levy, and about 9% expected revenue because of all the challenges that you raised even before the e-levy was approved, Mr. George.
Well, I think that Derek has largely made the case on the issue of revenue. For me, it's about the policy incoherence in everything that cuts and straddles various sectors, okay? Like I said, you have an e-levy that has trailed the course. 9%. It's scored 9%, and even that 9% is projected. There's still doubts that if you go ahead with cutting or deactivating SIM cards, you would even be able to make 10% of that amount or that you're looking for, because this 611 million is actually less than 9% of what the original expectation from e-levy was. And again, it's simply because the industry failed or the policymakers failed to listen to industry. You understand me? Now you have quick loan customers who have taken facilities, and people are holding back and not wanting to pay. They are saying, okay, if you want to deactivate my SIM, let's deactivate it. It's a disincentive for you to attract investors into the tech space, because don't forget, these quick loans have formed the basis for a new cadre of small-scale businesses. People who take 500 cedis, 1,000 cedis, and turn it around and run businesses and pay these facilities back. People, in fact, the quick loan at times has put food on the table of families. You cannot underestimate the value of this. But right now, industry players are going to be scared. How do I put in money into an industry as an OTT on the back of the services when a policy directive one day could cost me a loss of billions or millions of dollars? These are the kinds of policy incoherence we need to talk about. The minister is quick to point out Ghana's growing international recognition for our digital inclusion.
Indeed.
Ghana has a digital internet penetration rate of 53%, one of the best on the African continent. How are people getting digital access? SIM cards. So if you take and if you deactivate this SIM card, you are rolling back the successes we've made. These are the same arguments we made when we were introducing e-levy with digital payments. We said to them there was policy incoherence. You can't be taxing a digital payment platform when your central bank is thinking of introducing a digital currency. Now you are talking about digital access. You are talking about digitization. Dr. Bawumia is everywhere. Every speech he gives is about digitization and talking about digital progress. How do the citizens benefit from this so-called digital strides if the access to the digital world is taken away from them? And so, look, I've received messages here. Someone in Nkoko tells me of a 78-year-old woman who has to go 19 kilometers to the nearest telco office. When she gets there, the issue that we spoke about, and I can read that particular message specifically because it's telling. It tells you the challenges people are going through. Her name that she used to register, you know when we are registering our SIM cards and all of that, you know, we use different names. Mm-hmm. People just used. So she registered her Ghana card, her SIM card with Amadou Fie. Amadou Fie was the name she used to register. But for her Ghana card, it is Millicent Japan. Right. So because of the disparity in the names. However, if you were using the confirmation of the biometric systems, mm-hmm. her biometrics will be the same irrespective of her name. And you won't have this challenge. These are the realities. Another person has gone to the MTN office. He gets there, and because of the H on the front of the Ghana card that has gone faint, he's been asked to go and get a reprint. He's going to join a queue. He has to get his appointment date for August, end of August. Like Derek said, it appears as though the minister is, and you see, I keep saying the minister, he said we shouldn't personalize it. Like Derek said, if the aid authority, the NTA, was speaking, we won't be mentioning the minister's name.
Thank you.
It appears that the minister is relishing the suffering of Ghanaians. Why wait till Sunday if you are going to give an extension? Because, Maza, we've all agreed here. Say Kasa Yemframa. The minister, what she said in Kumasi, that there will be no extension. It is not true. She will extend it.